They grabbed her in front of everyone, because to them, a black woman alone at the airport could only mean trouble. No raised voice, no resistance, just two officers closing in like they had found something dangerous when all she did was stand in silence, eyes fixed on the arrivals board. Their hands moved fast, too fast to question, too proud to consider they were wrong. Her wrists were bound before the truth could speak, but her face remained still. No panic, no protest, just eyes, calm, piercing, quietly watching the ones who thought they were in control. The terminal hushed around her. Phones came up. Bystanders froze. The silence thickened as the world watched another injustice unfold. But what the officers didn't realize was that they hadn't just handcuffed a passenger. They had just restrained their own CIA handler. Have you ever been judged before they knew who you were? Comment your country if you've ever been misjudged. Agent Naomi Pierce blended in like a whisper in a crowded room. Early 30s, poised, alert, and dressed in a sleek white dress that concealed more power than any uniform ever could. Her curls framed a face that was unreadable yet commanding, her stance casual but precise. She stood near Gate 34 of the bustling international terminal, where sunlight spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows and reflected off polished marble floors. The airport was a symbol of movement, of nations connecting. Exactly the kind of place Naomi knew best. Trained to disappear in plain sight, she carried no badge, no visible weapon, and no backup. She didn't need it. Her eyes tracked her target through the crowd, a man with ties to black market arms trades, scheduled to board a flight to Istanbul. Naomi was the final piece in a 6-month CIA operation. Her job wasn't to detain. It was to observe, confirm, and when the moment was right, signal. But while she watched her target, someone else was watching her. Officer Thomas Reed, mid-40s, walked with the swagger of someone who had never been challenged and didn't think he ever would be. His partner, Officer Donnelly, trailed a few steps behind, bulkier, more brash. They'd been with airport security for over a decade and built reputations not on their instincts, but on their assumptions. They spotted Naomi standing alone near the restricted gate. She didn't fidget. She didn't look around nervously. And that, to Reed, was suspicious. He nudged Donnelly. You see her? No ID, no badge. Standing there like she owns the place. Donnelly narrowed his eyes. Think she's scouting something. Or waiting on someone she shouldn't be. Reed muttered, already walking toward her. Naomi saw them coming before they even clocked her direction. Her body didn't shift. She stayed rooted, eyes still trailing her target, who was now near a coffee kiosk. "Excuse me, ma'am," Reed said, voice clipped. "This area's restricted. I'm going to need to see some ID." Naomi turned, her expression unreadable. "I'm authorized to be here." Reed's lips tightened. "Authorized by who?" "I'm not at liberty to say," she replied calmly. Donnelly scoffed. "That's not how this works. Either you show ID or you come with us." The tension rose like heat from the floor. Reed's hand drifted toward his cuffs. Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't run. She simply locked eyes with him and said nothing. To them, silence was defiance. But for her, it was strategy. They saw a black woman standing alone where they didn't think she belonged. They didn't see the elite operative running surveillance on an international threat right in front of them. They didn't see the one person in that terminal with more classified access than anyone they'd ever met. And in that moment, the glass walls that surrounded them became more than just architecture. They became mirrors, reflecting everything they refused to question. "Ma'am, this area's off limits," Show ID. Officer Reed repeated, stepping closer, his tone sharper now, firm with assumption and void of curiosity. His hand hovered near his belt, already convinced this was a matter of compliance rather than communication. Naomi didn't shift. Her hands remained by her sides, her voice steady. "I'm authorized to be here." "By who?" he snapped, the edge in his voice revealing more than frustration. It was laced with something deeper. Discomfort masked as dominance. "You people think you can walk anywhere, do whatever you want." Naomi's eyes met his, unblinking. But this time, she said nothing. The weight of her silence hung in the air like a held breath. No apology, no explanation. Just the look of someone who had seen this before and knew exactly how it would go. That silence struck Reed harder than any outburst. It challenged his authority without saying a word. And that he couldn't handle. "Turn around," he barked. "Hands behind your back." She obliged, not from fear, but precision. Every move was deliberate. Every breath was controlled. The metallic snap of the cuffs echoed through the terminal, louder than it should have been, slicing through idle chatter and rolling suitcase wheels. People stopped. Heads turned. Phones were lifted. A teenager pressed record. A woman gasped quietly. Officer Donnelly stepped in, smug. "We'll get her booked before lunch. Probably won't even make the news." Naomi said nothing, but her eyes scanned the perimeter. Her target, the arms dealer, paused mid-conversation across the hall. He looked toward the commotion, recognized her face, and took a step back into the crowd. Her mission was crumbling before her, not because she failed, but because someone else failed to see her. Still cuffed, Naomi's eyes flicked toward a TSA agent standing a few feet away. He looked nervous, chewing his lip, eyes darting between the officers and Naomi. He recognized her, not from TV, not from news, from a briefing months ago, a name whispered in national security meetings, Naomi Pierce. But he didn't move. Not yet. She gave him nothing, no nod, no plea, just a calm look. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was a test of everyone. And in that terminal, under the cold white lights and the watching world, power was shifting. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But it had begun. The hallway toward the airport's detention wing stretched ahead like a tunnel of embarrassment waiting to collapse. Naomi walked between Officers Reed and Donnelly, her wrists still bound in cold steel, but her expression untouched. Each step she took was measured, not just in motion, but in meaning. Behind them, the whispers had turned into a low hum, the sound of collective disbelief caught between curiosity and outrage. Cell phones followed their path like a trail of blinking red eyes. Just as Reed reached to push open the access door to the holding area, a voice thundered across the terminal, slicing through the noise like a bolt of lightning. "Uncuff her, now!" They all stopped. A man in a dark gray security uniform, badge glinting beneath the overhead lights, stormed toward them. His face was flushed, breath clipped, but his voice carried the kind of authority that didn't need a badge to be believed. "You just handcuffed Naomi Pierce." Reed blinked. "Who?" Before the security head could speak again, another figure emerged from the corridor behind them, taller, older, wearing a dark, tailored suit with the kind of composure that only comes from operating in shadows. "Step back, gentlemen," he said. "I'm Agent Miller, Langley." His ID flashed briefly, but it was the tone in his voice that made both officers freeze. "You just restrained your federal handler. Agent Pierce was running deep bait on a high-level weapons smuggler." Donnelly took a full step back. Reed's mouth opened, but no words came. Miller didn't flinch. She was planted here to confirm the final handoff. You too? You just burned 7 months of prep with one racist miscalculation. Naomi's wrists were released. The cuffs clattered to the tile like punctuation in a courtroom. She brought her arms forward slowly, rubbing her wrists once before standing to full height, shoulders square, chin high. Her voice was cold, sharpened not by rage, but by the weight of precision. I told you I was authorized to be here. The officers stared at her like they were seeing a ghost of their own arrogance. You just ruined a 7-month international sting operation, she said, her voice like frost over fire. You blew surveillance. You compromised a covert intercept. And you did it because you couldn't imagine someone like me standing where I stood. Behind her, phones were still recording. The crowd had doubled, maybe tripled. Every eye in that terminal was now watching the watchers. Authority was no longer in the hands that held the badge. It was in the silence of the woman they tried to restrain. Agent Miller stepped forward. You'll be hearing from my director and the Department of Justice. Reed tried to speak again. We didn't know. That's exactly the problem, Naomi replied, cutting him off without raising her voice. You never asked. You only assumed. And then she turned her back to them, not in defiance, but in dismissal. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask for permission to leave. The kind of calm that rewrites the entire chain of command in a single walk away. The cuffs lay on the floor behind her, cold, empty, and now useless. In the quiet aftermath of the chaos, Naomi stood in a debriefing room just beyond the terminal walls, glass frosted, voices low, tension simmering beneath every surface. Agent Miller paced slowly, a tablet in one hand, his other clenched. Across from them, the 2 officers, Reed and Donnelly, sat stiffly, no longer speaking with certainty, no longer shielded by their uniforms. The screen on the wall displayed a grainy overhead capture of the man Naomi had been tailing. He was already gone. The timestamp showed him slipping out of the airport minutes after she was cuffed, his backpack full, his face calm, his steps quick. The CIA had spent 7 months tracking him through arms shipments, financial laundering routes, and encrypted chatter. All of it had led to this moment, this terminal, this flight, and now it was gone. Agent Miller didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We issued a full access pass, a federal do not interfere bulletin, with her name, her face, her purpose. He turned the tablet toward the officers. The memo glared in sharp black text. You received it 2 days ago. Reed stared blankly at the screen. Donnelly swallowed hard. We didn't connect it, he said quietly. I thought... He paused, struggling for the right words. I thought we were helping. Naomi turned slowly to face him, her voice steady, and stripped of anything that might make the truth easier to bear. You weren't helping. You were profiling. Donnelly looked down at his hands. She continued, not angrily, but with clarity. You saw a black woman standing still in a place you didn't think she belonged. You didn't ask what I was doing. You didn't look at my eyes or listen to my tone. You looked at my skin, and you filled in the blanks with your own fear. Reed opened his mouth as if to protest, but no sound came. Naomi's words carried more than reprimand. They carried history. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a pattern, and now you're on record. The silence that followed wasn't for reflection. It was consequence unfolding in real time. These weren't just officers who'd messed up. They were symbols of a deeper rot, a structure that still couldn't tell the difference between a threat and a woman doing her job with dignity and precision. And Naomi, once the target of their assumptions, now stood taller than all of them, not because she needed to assert herself, but because the truth finally had weight behind it. The fallout came swiftly. Within 48 hours, Officers Reed and Donnelly were placed on immediate suspension, pending a full federal oversight investigation. Their names headlined internal review panels, and the footage, once a shaky clip captured by a teenage bystander, was now replaying on national broadcasts. It wasn't the brutality that made it viral. It was the quiet. The handcuffing of a calm, composed woman who never raised her voice, never resisted, and never flinched. The stillness in her eyes as their hands gripped her wrists said everything the world needed to hear. Naomi Pierce didn't speak publicly right away. She didn't need to. Her silence had already told the story. But behind closed doors, change was moving. The Department of Justice, in collaboration with Langley, initiated a sweeping review of racial bias in transit policing, especially at airports and train stations. Her case became the foundation for new training protocols, not because it was unique, but because it was irrefutable. She hadn't broken. She hadn't shouted. And still, they saw her as a threat. That was the truth. Unembellished, undeniable. Naomi was reassigned but not demoted, promoted quietly within the agency, now heading strategic analysis on domestic field intelligence. In her new office, minimal and sharp, one object stood out among the black furniture and framed operation maps. A shadow box on the wall, containing the same pair of handcuffs they had used to bind her wrists. Framed not as a wound, but as a symbol. Not of shame, but of what silence, when held with strength, can shift in a broken system. She stared at them sometimes, not bitterly, but knowingly. Those cuffs weren't her story. They were everyone else's. And they would never forget what it meant when the wrong hands used them on the right person. At her first public press conference months later, standing behind a podium lined with press microphones and federal seals, Naomi delivered her remarks with the same measured cadence that had defined her from the beginning. "I wore no badge that day," she said. "Only skin they didn't understand. And that was enough for them to see danger. But I was never in danger. They were. Because real danger isn't who walks through your terminal. It's who you choose not to see." The room went silent. Not out of fear, but reverence. That day, a country was forced to reckon with what it means to profile power. And the woman who had been ignored, restrained, and underestimated, she had already won. Without a raised voice, without a raised hand, just by standing in stillness while the truth made its own noise. They tried to shackle her in public, but they only revealed what real power looks like when it stays still. In a world quick to judge and even quicker to punish, Naomi Pierce didn't need a badge, a weapon, or a raised voice to make her presence known. Her silence spoke louder than sirens, her stillness louder than orders barked through clenched teeth. They saw her as a disruption, but she was a mirror, reflecting everything they refused to confront. What they thought was restraint became revelation. What they assumed was weakness became the most unshakable form of strength. Have you ever been punished for how you look, only to later be the one writing the rules? Have you ever stood so quietly that the noise around you crumbled on its own? Like this, if you know what silent power feels like. Share it if you believe injustice eventually exposes itself, without needing anyone to scream. Thanks for watching. Stay close, because the next takedown might come dressed just like you.